Right. Good morning, everyone. On today's webinar, you have myself, Mark Shirley from App Technology, and we have Barry Daniels and Derek Steele from Droplet. What we're going to be talking through today is how a state actor attack on national energy infrastructure was prevented. And what we'll be doing is demonstrating how Droplet was able to defend against a zero-day attack where other high security providers failed. Natural Power is a wind farm provider, and they had a number of challenging legacy applications in their estate that were required to support their wind farms. So effectively carrying a lot of technical debt. This resulted in needing multiple legacy applications, those applications needing to be supported, those applications needing to be secured to meet Cyber Essentials Plus security requirements, but also looking to simplify their support model. So in terms of getting a user up and running in this estate, it took a day and a half of setup time, required multiple devices, and was very complex to manage. So Droplet was implemented as a solution for this, which meant that the support model was simplified, applications were secured and able to meet C+ requirements, and significantly reducing the setup time. So dropping down from a day and a half to get a user up and running down to simply 10 minutes. So it's a massive improvement. Natural Power became a target for a state actor cyber attack. It came through as a phishing attack that was clicked by a member of staff, and this resulted in access to that environment being completely locked out. The manufacturer couldn't access the environment. Droplet, as the solution that was embedded, meant that the impacts of that attack were contained, but more significantly, it was able to be rolled back and brought back up online within hours. And as a result of this, the Droplet team were part of a 12-week review process with the National Cybersecurity Centre and are now working alongside them with IASME on the Cyber Resilience platform. What I'll do now is I'm going to hand over to Barry from Droplet, and he will talk through the technical ways that Droplet was able to prevent this attack and prevent the impact of this attack where other security platforms failed. So Barry, I'm just going to flick on to your slides.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the webinar today. So as Mark really alluded to, it's quite a complex setup that Natural Power had in place. They had the complexity of they take on board, they're like mission critical center for multiple different wind farms across the country, which means they have to ingest different manufacturers' products that operate because of the whole piece around OT. OT goes out in the field and the wind farm's not going to be replaced every 3 to 5 years like software has to be updated. So you've got a juxtaposition between their big challenge around how are you going to keep things up to date? How are you going to stay compliant? Because they are looking after critical national infrastructure. How are you going to be able to meet those requirements going forward and future-proof the solution? The complexities around doing that, as you can imagine, with ingesting things that were of a legacy era, whether it be XP-based systems that have run these turbines, whether it be Windows 7, whether it be a Windows 10 environment that we know is going end of life now within the next year. And they had all of these challenges. And in some cases, some of the software that's written for these older turbines wasn't upgradable. It wasn't able to change. It isn't easy to take it forward. And the cost associated with that, the complexity, the operational headache of doing that is almost impossible to manage. And that goes across a use case. We're talking today about Natural Power, but if you think across a use case, across every environment that you can think of out there, and I'm sure many of you on the webinar come from different industries, but face the same challenge, the juxtaposition between operating systems having a 3 to 5 year life cycle versus your operation needing an application or your operation needing something that drives some operational technology that has to last for a lot longer. Could be a plane, could be a train, could be washing machine, could be a fridge, could be a valve in a nuclear facility where we look after those kind of industries as well. Droplet's an application container. that with their various applications having different challenges, these 3 laptops they had to deploy was because of conflicts in that software layer as well. So one manufacturer might have needed a certain Java version to operate, whereas another needed another Java version. And that couldn't exist on the same piece of software and from the Windows layer because they would clash, they would conflict. So this is where some of the complexity was born out of why they needed to deploy 3 laptops. They needed to set up separate VPNs because there's different structures of logging into these different sites and these different environments. And then there was the CE Plus challenge. The CE Plus challenge, how are you going to ingest XP, Windows 7, and have it compliant? Very, very challenging thing to do. And so what we went through on the journey with this whole piece was able to simplify that whole process, as Mark alluded to. It now takes them in a multi-container world that Droplet is able to set up, one laptop that they deploy. That laptop, and it can be any operating system with Droplet. We don't have to deliver back to Windows. In their world, it is a Windows 11 estate they deliver back to. However, we have the facilities to be able to deliver to any platform. We are completely independent of where we deliver our container technology. It runs in isolation in its own space, in its own kernel space. That can be delivered back to Windows, can be delivered back to Mac, can be delivered back to Chromebooks, can be delivered back to a Linux machine. We don't care what the end user platform is, we can deliver that back. We have another side to Droplet as well around the server side that we can contain as well and protect the back end and encrypt the technology between the two. More on that in a moment or two. But from the Cyber Essentials Plus and certification piece, they had to go through obviously rigorous tests, pen tests, that obviously would have failed in their existing state. And this state actor attack that came through and affected them was from a zero-day threat. They'd got through traditional large household name vendors because of a zero-day threat. They were able to penetrate through at a local level. They had total lockdown and no access at a local level. All of the manufacturers of those wind turbines had no local access. Because Droplet was deployed by Natural Power, they were totally isolated from the breach. I just wanted a little correction on before. It wasn't a 2-hour downtime period for them. They had no downtime. They had full operational control of the site. They had full remote control of the site. It's why we kept operational resilience there for the business, and it didn't become a national news story. So the attacker got through all these large, high-profile vendors through their high-end security tools. They'd lock them down at a local level, but then couldn't crack into the Droplet layer. So even though from a point of view of what Natural Power has to ingest in operating through his Windows 7, Windows XP, Windows 10, we sit in a true isolation layer in its own kernel space that never trusts anything. It's a very different approach to lots of what I've seen in operational technology at the moment around zero trust. And I'll explain on the next slide around that. So just to summarize finally on that before we move forward, Mark, sorry, the whole operation, complexity, operational ways, there's massive operational efficiencies running Droplet. The end user is blissfully unaware that Droplet's there. They have shortcuts on their desktop, on their choice of operating system. They double click, they seamlessly get their app. Unencumbered, unchanged, no operational downtime. That whole piece of deploying from 1.5 days down to 10 minutes is a massive. The operational cost of support of that now, again, is simplified with the way in which Droplet deploys. We are a container technology. I just want to say we differ from the traditional container technologies. We're not a rebadged Kubernetes. We're not a rebadged Docker. It's our own ones and zeros. We've built a technology that from day zero had security by its core by design. Every decision we make in design of the product, every decision we go through in the design of the product is to minimize the risk from a security point of view. Everything we build is secure by design. And that's what differentiates us from the traditional container players. We don't have API structures. We're not an open framework. We've been built for a different purpose to what those other people have been built to control for coders, the cloud migration to scale up, scale down. We have all the benefits of that, but we've built with a different purpose in how we are able to protect with a minimal attack surface as possible. Whereas the Dockers and the Kubernetes have a large attack surface point because of how they're built by design. Well, thanks. So, Droplet, how do we achieve this? How are we able to do something that seems like black magic and voodoo? What do we go through as a product? When I said we build secure by design, this is Droplet in a nutshell. Mission critical, we're no stranger to. We have customer bases across nuclear, military, government, central and local government, NHS, large enterprises. Obviously, what we've been talking about today is one use case on natural power, but we have lots of different use cases across multiple industries. In most cases, what we're protecting tends to be a mission critical application. It tends to be that bespoke piece that's written or that thing that's deployed that is in juxtaposition, breaking the application management lifecycle, protecting the mission critical app. We can control to an nth degree the data lane on a per application basis. So we can control what that application can see in terms of data. We remove the admin privileges from the user completely. So they have no way to elevate their rights. They have no way to use bad code in an application and break out through traditional structures. We have one other use case on a large catering manufacturer that supplies to the military, where they went through a pen test for their CE Plus audit. They'd gone through best due diligence with their application. They'd made it run what was Windows 10 at the time. They've now migrated it to Windows 11 inside Droplet. But what they had at the time, they'd gone through and packaged into MSIX with app attach. There was vulnerabilities in the bespoke code that they actually had written. It's a bespoke application for themselves. They were able to elevate their rights within that, the pen tester, and they were then able to break out through the API structure of the app package, thus failing the CE Plus audit and putting millions of pounds worth of contract at risk with the military. Rinse, repeat, a very simple process to convert things into Droplet. We were able to re-rinse that, put that through the sheep dip. It's been deployed now for 5 years, passing the CE Plus requirements and beyond that now within that facility, enabling that contract to persist. Because we take away the admin privileges, we control what data can be seen. So we couldn't use that as a breakout. We have control of the network, which I'll come across at the moment as well. From an endpoint point of view, I covered this off earlier. We don't care where you sit, Droplet. The flexibility in architectures are such that we can deploy offline to the edge. We can deploy a remote branch office type solution or offline. Let's take a ship, for example, retrofitting in manufacturing or in the shipping environment or in any other OT type environment. We can retrofit a device that would run all of the modern components of this security, run the legacy layer unchanged, deliver it back to the retro hardware, repurposing it as Linux machines, for example, and then deliver an end user experience that's seamless. So suddenly you've got this way in which you can move the whole security posture forward through a simple conversion process and deliver back this enhanced security in a way that will be compliant and future-proof you in this never trust model. From the application point of view, a lot of what we educate now on the application layer is Droplet can sit in separate bubble layers. As I said, we can sit offline at the edge, we can sit in hybrid mode, we can sit on any cloud. We can run your servers, we can run your client-side applications. It doesn't matter to us. Everything is covered. And in this isolation bundles that we have, you can separate out your Outlook tier from your ERP tier, from your operational tier, from your sales tier. Each application tier that you have, each function you have in the business, unlike something like a network layer of NSX that just takes care of the network segmentation, or a zero trust that puts the checks and balances in, we have controls right down to the application layer, right down to the user layer. And we control the network as well. So it gives us different ways to control. It gives us different ways to protect. And you can isolate these application tiers such that one breach somewhere, one misconfiguration somewhere in your traditional security stack can then open up and lead to a breach that goes across the whole organization and locks the whole organization down. The application stack that we take care of, you'd isolate. Let's take the Outlook layer as a key example. It's your biggest risk as a business. It's the one application that brings outsiders into your environment. You're bringing in external links, you're bringing in external attachments. In the world of Droplet, we can isolate that. We can make sure that even if your security tools let you down, even if you get a breach, even if you have something that takes you down, only the Outlook layer will be affected. The operation of the business on every other layer will continue to run. Safe in the knowledge it can't break east-west, it can't go anywhere. It's in its own isolation bubble. And from that point of view, we're a container technology as well. You can aggressively snapshot us. This talks more to the slide that Mark was talking about at the front. You can be up and running again within hours, minutes, depends on how large, obviously, the snapshot is. But you can set your own aggressive RPOs and RTOs and have a better business risk and recovery position. So Droplet does offer that Mark was showing on the first slide. It just isn't applicable to the use case. We protected it in its entirety in the use case of natural power. They never had a minute of downtime because they couldn't get through the Droplet Never Trust layer. On the network layer, we have a network overlay. So anything that you're doing across the environment, talking to the back-end databases, talking to the servers, whatever the application needs to talk out to, we can control that network path on a per application basis so that traffic can only travel to where it's supposed to on a given IP address on a given port and nothing else. So once you know what your application needs to talk to, you configure Droplet in a way that protects the outbound layer to only be able to do that. We also have military grade encryption on our network layer. So if let's take a scenario that's popular, and it's one that's similar to the use case that we discussed today. You have an old Internet Explorer that needs to run some Java process talking to a back-end database, for example. In a Droplet world, we can isolate that down. You can have it so that that old Internet Explorer can exist in isolation and then can't be used as a breakout on the network, can't get out to the internet, can only go and do the job it's supposed to do. And say it has TLS1, an inherently insecure protocol that would normally travel free across the network, could be intercepted by a hacker, could then be a vulnerability attack point in the middle. There's a man in the middle attack. Because it sits in our modern encryption layer, to military grade encryption, then that prevents that man in the middle attack as well. So you can still run inherently insecure protocols across the Droplet layer, safe in the knowledge you can't get in. The perimeter defense is the never trust model. The perimeter defense, basically, what that will achieve and what that will do for you is say nothing shall ever pass. We trust nothing. We never trust anything. We sit as a layer above the identity layer. We don't rely on identity. It's not a two-factor, multi-factor credential. If you look at the RSA hack of a year or two ago, all those things are based on identity. Every security product that's out there in the market today of any note is based on identity. Droplet does not rely on identity. That's what makes Droplet completely different. The controls, the checks, the balances. We don't give anybody the right to change that. We will deny all inbound traffic by default. And this is how, in the main, we prevented the zero-day threat because it was a very clever attack. They'd managed to find vulnerabilities. They've been able to get the right credential access. They were able to go through the checks and balances of the traditional firewalls, all the security products that were put in place to protect this critical national infrastructure. Droplet was there as a layer that just see it as external traffic. Didn't matter how clever it was. Didn't matter it had the right admin credentials. Didn't matter it had the right username and password. Even if something is supposed to talk to what's inside the Droplet layer, it will get blocked, it will get dropped, it will get black holed. By default, with no exceptions, and you can't whitelist things in. You can't configure that like a traditional firewall. And when you look at all of these checks and balances that I've described through the onion layer today, that human layer that is the biggest problem in security. It's a big problem from two angles. If you think of all the traditional security stack, this 7-point OSI model that I'm really talking you through in a way today, all of those products need configuring. It's multiple products that have to talk to each other, have to cohesively sit together. It only takes one misconfiguration by a human, someone to get something wrong, that opens up the gate, that opens up the way into an environment, and suddenly it comes down like a pack of cards. So Droplet protects that because we're taking away the admin privileges, controlling where each data layer can go, has control at the application layer, controls the network paths. Perimeter defense blocks anything coming from outside in. Even on a compromised host, you can't get from where you are to inside the Droplet layer. We have no attack surface. We have no APIs, SDKs like the traditional container technologies of Docker and Kubernetes that are fighting against patching. Constantly, you're seeing it in every security forum that you go to at the moment. There's been a vulnerability exposed in here. There's been this API. It's an attack point. There are so many attack surface points in those traditional container technologies. They're playing whack-a-mole, the same as Microsoft have to. Too many entry points. And so that human layer that can misconfigure something through the multiple technologies to get it wrong, that goes away. It's one cohesive product that takes care of all of this. And that is the never trust model. The other human side to it, say there's a bad actor inside your business that wants to do you harm. He'd normally bring his keys in, a USB, he'd plug it in. He can't get it from the host into the Droplet layer. He can't then crack through. It's just external traffic. All the admin privileges have been taken away from inside the Droplet layer when it's deployed. So he can't then elevate his rights and do his bad things, get his PowerShell, off he goes to do his bad stuff. So to my knowledge, and to people like the NCSE and people that we've dealt with in the large ISVs, no one has seen a product that covers all 7 of the OSI layers like Droplet does. And I've just explained to you today. And this is how Droplet was able to prevent a 0-day state actor attack on critical national infrastructure. It's the never trust model. Back to you, Mark.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much, Barry. So yeah, and thank you everyone on the call for your time today. I've had a quick look and I've not seen any questions come in. So if there are any questions, please feel free to follow on from the webinar, send them through to myself. Off the back of today's webinar, I will send out a summary slide deck. Obviously, we'd be really happy to hear with any questions or thoughts from this. Hopefully, this was a useful session in understanding both how Droplet could be used to improve support for challenging as well as security conscious applications, but also Barry's detailed walkthrough of how that prevented this state actor attack. Before I close today's webinar, the final thing I will do is just a quick highlight. So on Wednesday, December the 11th, we'll have a separate webinar, which is all going to be around application packaging in the modern environment. But yes, thank you ever so much for everyone for your time on the call today. I will close today's webinar and obviously hopefully see some of you on the next session. All right, thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.